Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Shooting Straight, Living Life in Truth. I'm Charles, your host for the evening, and tonight we're going to be talking about moderation. But before we get into that, I just want to say thank you for tuning in this season. This is going to be our last episode for this season. We're going to take a short break in the meantime because we're going to make a few changes to the programming. I want to take it up a notch and pull up the production value a little bit more. And we're going to be working on that during the break. So when you come back, you'll see some new things. Hopefully you'll like it better and it'll be more enjoyable for you guys. That's the whole purpose that we're taking this break this time. So when we're done with that, we'll come back. I'll make sure to put the word out when exactly we're coming back. I don't exactly have a date on it just yet. We're going to have our first planning meeting week after next because we're going to take this next week off. And then that following week, we're going to start planning for everything. So just stay tuned. I'll put the word out on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube as to when we're coming back. But in the meantime, I want you guys to keep shooting things straight and living life in truth and maximize daily life. Right? Even in these hard times, even in these frustrating times with the way things are going and the cost of everything going through the roof, we can still have a great life. So if you would, just focus on the things that we've talked about so far in these two seasons and put them into practice. It'll give you some time to see that it actually does work. With that said, let's go ahead and get into tonight's topic of moderation. Like last week, I want to give you the definition and then dive into some of the nuances so that we can get a full comprehension and understanding of what moderation is, what it isn't, and how it plays into our daily life. So, as a noun, moderation is avoiding extremes of behavior or expression, observing reasonable limits. In other words, your behavior is under some form of discipline, self-discipline. You recognize that, hey, that's an extreme. I need to pull myself back a little bit. I'm going a little too far that way or a little too far that way. Let's reel it back in. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about there, which is why it's also defined as calm and temperate. Temperate is that behavior under discipline, tending toward the mean or average amount of or dimension, not violent, severe, or intense. Professing or characterized by political or social beliefs that are not extreme, limited in scope or effect, not expensive, reasonable or low in price. And speaking of colors, it's a medium lightness or a medium chroma. Now, for those of you that are artists, you understand that, okay? As a verb, it's to lessen the intensity or extremeness of something or someone's behavior, to preside over or act as a chairman of something, or to act as a moderator. We all know what that is from Facebook and social media. To become less violent, severe, or intense. Now, if you notice, both as a noun and as a verb, and when we get into the synonyms, you'll notice that it is talking about not being in extremes, being less violent, less severe, less intense, right? And it's important, and you'll see why here in just a few minutes. But first, let's go over these synonyms real quick. So we have temperate again: abate, de-escalate, decline, decrease, die away or die down or die out, diminish, drain away, drop off, dwindle, ease, ebb, fall away, lessen, let up, lower, phase down, ratchet down, recede, relent, remit, shrink, subside, taper off, wane, centrist, middle of the rotor. All right. So we're not talking about extreme left, extreme right. We're not talking about extreme forward, extreme backwards. We're not talking about extremes here when we're talking about moderation. Moderation is that area somewhere right in the middle, okay? That right in the middle is where we're needing to be. And that's what I'm talking about tonight. Because extremes, generally speaking, for the most part, end up producing negative results. And that's important, and you'll see that when we get into the antonyms. So let's take a look at those antonyms. The antonyms meaning immoderate, meaning anything that's not moderate, or intemperate, anything that's intolerant, anything that is not under discipline. And it has a tendency to accumulate, balloon up, build, burgeon, enlarge, escalate, expand, grow, increase, intensify, mount, mushroom, pick up, rise, snowball. We all heard the phraseology using the snowball, turning into an avalanche. Well, soar, swell, wax, extremist, radical, revolutionary, revolutionist, ultrist. All right. So I don't know about you, but none of those things actually sounded like a positive thing to me. So if the antonyms of the word moderation are things that represent or communicate negative results, why do we go to extremes? And this is something that all of us need to work on, myself included, because there are things that I take to extremes sometimes, and I'm still reeling that stuff in myself. But when you live life in general in moderation, you have a tendency to be much happier. Okay? Now, I'm going to take this to an extreme just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. All right? So, we in America, because of how rich of a society we have, i.e., it's often referred to as a first world type thing, and we refer to the problems that we have as first world problems. Well, let's take a look at why that is. Because really, technically, we in America have a tendency to confuse want with need. All right? And when you get right down to the nitty gritty of things, it comes down to how you define that word need. So how do you define it? How do you define a need? Me personally, I define it like this. Something you will die without. Everything else is a luxury that will make your life easier and more pleasant. Now, what do I mean by that? Basically, there's 5 basic needs that humanity has, all right? And if those 5 basic needs are met, then humanity will survive, humanity will live physically, okay? Water is the first one. It's the most important, right? Your body is pretty much made up of 60 to 75% of water. If you're lacking water, then bodily systems are going to start shutting down. Organs will shut down. You're not going to be able to think correctly, and you'll get into a state of severe dehydration, a mineral imbalance, which will throw your entire system off. And before you know it, you can't think straight, you can't function properly, and then you're dead. Now, the general accepted length of time that you can go without water is generally 3 days, right? 72 hours. They say you can go without water and be fine, or without dying, all right? After 3 days without water, you're probably going to die. Well, I'm going to throw a wrench in that little philosophy because, quite frankly, it all depends on your environment and the situation that you find yourself in. For example, if you're in a survival scenario, right, and you're out in the middle of a desert somewhere where there's no water, and you have to figure out a way to get water, and you go 3 days without water, yeah, you're probably going to be dead because you're dealing with extreme high temperatures. You're going to be sweating. Your body's going to be emitting water vapor and losing water pretty rapidly in that environment. So yeah, you're probably going to die within 24 to 20, within 48 to 72 hours. Pretty good chance of that. But if you're in a moderate climate, in a rainforest type environment, not a tropical rainforest, but in a rainforest that's in a moderate climate, like for example, North Carolina or Washington State or Oregon, in places like that, you could probably survive a week without water. And it also depends on your physical fitness level, your overall health, your conditioning, whether or not you've been through that before. All of this plays into account. So just simply making a small statement like you need water or you'll die within 3 days is oversimplifying that a lot. All right. And that to me is one extreme. It's an extreme to the low end. All right. Saying, if you'll die without water, within 4 days, conceivable, right? But again, it all depends on the circumstances in your environment, right? So, just take it for what it is. But that is one of the most important basic need of human beings, is that you need water. The second thing you need is land. All right. The reason you need land is you need fiber and you need things to put into your body. Pardon me. That are going to provide nutrients that can only come from plants. Well, the highest source of it is going to be in plants, and you're not going to have plants without land. All right. You also can't build shelter without land. All right. So land is like number 2 most important thing. The next thing on the list is shelter. All right. Shelter is extremely important because it's going to keep you isolated from the environment. So let's say it's a really hot temperate climate, then that shelter is going to help shade you and keep some of that heat off of you and help increase your chances of survival. The same thing is true if you're in a cold environment. That shelter will help keep you warm, right? And protect it from the cold so that you don't get frostbite and things like that can ultimately lead to death. All right. Number 4 is food. I think we all understand why food is important, right? Food, though, you can go without for a much longer period of time. Generally speaking, the general consensus is that you can live for 40 days without food, without a problem. At, 41, 42, 43, 45 days, you're probably going to die. Well,
oh boy!
Again, that's all dependent on the environment and the situation you find yourself in. All right. Generally speaking, yes, you can go without food for 40 days, but again, you're going to suffer for it. There are going to be some things that are going to be lacking, like your fine motor skills, your ability to think clearly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to be affected by it, but you can go much longer without food than you can water, land, or shelter. All right. Now, the last thing on the list, mankind lived without for a little while. All right. But once they figured it out, it certainly made life easier. But in all honesty, I consider it one of the 5 basic needs. And the reason that I consider it as one of the 5 basic needs is because fire is good for a lot of things. Like I said earlier, when it comes to winter, if you have a shelter and you have a fire, then you're going to stay warm and you're not going to be quite as in danger of dying of hypothermia as you would be without that. The other thing that fire is good for is the ability to cook food. Cooking food and being able to do it in such a way that it kills diseases and funguses and algae and all kinds of and viruses and bacteria and all kinds of other things that can make you sick. Fire is absolutely necessary. All right. So those are the 5 basic things, 5 things that I consider the basic needs of humanity. Those are things you have to have or you will die. All right. That is a need. There's no ifs, no ands, no buts about it. Those are needs. If you have those things provided for you on a daily basis, then be grateful for it and thank God for it, because He's the one that made most of those things for you. All right. So with that said, I need you to understand that anything beyond that, I consider a want. All right. And those wants make your life easier, make it more comfortable. All right. So, moderation in those things is not a bad thing. Moderation in those things can actually make for a really happy life. It's just when you start taking it to extremes and getting off into materialism that you start finding some problems. Now, I'm going to give you a few common examples of what moderation isn't and what they cause in society. So let's take a look at these common examples for a minute. You have gluttony and drunkenness. What are those things? And starvation. What are these things? It's overeating. Drunkenness is drinking too much alcohol to where you lose control over your faculties. Starvation, well, that's obvious. You're not getting enough food. All right. All of these things are negative things and have negative effects on your body. Now, I can hear some people out there saying right now, oh, you're fat shaming. No, I'm not fat shaming. I'm just being realistic and I'm being truthful. All right. Medical science has proven that gluttony and starvation are two extremes that do have negative effects on the human body and a person's ability to function as they're meant to. Okay? I'm just giving you the truth. I'm shooting you straight. I'm not fat shaming. I'm not fat hating. I'm not doing any of that kind of stuff. So take that and just shove it into a can and throw it into pile 13 because that's where I'm going to put it. All right? Now, going on with these examples, we have lasciviousness. If you're not familiar with that, I mentioned it earlier. It's basically behavior without controls. In other words, you just go out and willy-nilly do whatever you want because it feels good. All right. One example of that kind of thing would be promiscuity. All right. Now, in case you haven't heard that word before, that's going out and being essentially overly sexually active. All right. Sleeping with just about anybody you come in contact with, or sleeping with just about anybody that you decide to date, and you date somebody new every week or every 2 weeks or every month. We're talking promiscuity when you're having sex with people just willy-nilly, randomly, whenever you want to, kind of thing, without any kind of self-control on that aspect. Well, another thing that I'm going to include in here, and some of y'all are going to go, oh my gosh, religion and atheism. All right, these are two opposite extremes, and they're extremes. One is religion, and they take it to such an extreme that they take it to the letter of the law, and there's no leniency, no tolerance, no grace, no mercy. It's just, this is what it says. Bam, 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 bam. No give, no take, no nothing. No taking into consideration the human aspect of things and the humanity of things. All right. Atheism, on the other hand, goes to the other extreme and says there is no God. There's no God, then there's no moral compass. And if there's no moral compass, then what do you think happens? A whole lot of stuff can happen. All right. So, moving on with these examples, you have unprovoked violence. That's an extreme. War is an extreme. All right? And it's usually, those are usually extremes that come about because of intolerance. Intolerance. The lack of ability to tolerate other people, okay, is an extreme. It's an extreme, guys. We all have to live with other people. We all need to understand the other people that we deal with on a regular basis. Nobody's perfect, so we're going to have to tolerate some inconsistencies and some irregularities, and we're going to have to tolerate some things that aren't exactly positive all the time. All right? But again, the things that we're tolerating don't need to be those extremes. What do I mean by the extremes? Well, let's take a look at some more of these that are on the list. Enabling somebody that has bad behavior, right? If somebody's doing something that's negative and you give them the ability to continue doing that, that's an extreme, all right? We got to stop that kind of stuff, all right? And Next on the list, I'm just going to go ahead and read through these and then kind of explain them as I go. Abuse, obviously, in all forms, that's an extreme. Over medicating and under medicating. All right. Now, these abuse, obviously, we all know. All right, is negative. All right. Discipline is a positive thing when it's done in moderation. A lack of discipline creates problems, but abuse also creates problems. So there's your extremes, right? No discipline, abuse, and right here in the middle, you have proper discipline. Okay? That's a good thing. That produces healthy things. That's why these things are important. All right? Going back to that scripture verse that I quoted earlier to you when I said that it was a universal principle, right? All things are lawful for me, but not all things are expedient. And then Johann Wolfgang Goethe's comment, the Prophet Muhammad's comment, all talking about moderation, right? So, yes, drinking alcohol, no big deal. If you got a problem with alcoholism, it's a big deal. Getting drunk, being an alcoholic, that is a problem. It's an extreme. All right? Not drinking alcohol at all is the opposite extreme. Now, depending on how you look at that, that can be good, that can be bad. It's just whatever, you know. I mean, there are some medicinal purposes behind alcohol consumption. There is. You don't believe me? Go look it up. All right? It's one of the things I learned as a medic. But too much alcohol can kill you. All right? Just like medications, Tylenol, ibuprofen, Motrin, you name it. All right? Too much of anything is negative. Okay? Not taking enough of it can also be bad. So there's your over medicating and under medicating. All right? And since it's, new to everybody and it's a new thing in society, medicinal marijuana. All right? There's a reason that it's a controlled substance. There's a reason why medicinal marijuana is legal in the state of Florida and why recreational marijuana use is not. All right? With the medicinal marijuana, it's regulated, it's controlled, it's handed out in moderation to accomplish a specific purpose. Recreational marijuana use, I'm not going to judge you if you do it, but I will say this. If you're going to do it in moderation, because there are some health benefits to it, and I'm not going to deny that. I personally don't do it. I don't use it because personally I don't like what it does to me. Yes, I know what it does to me because I did it in high school. I did a few things in high school. All right? But I don't like what marijuana does to me. I don't like how it makes me feel. So I don't do it. Okay? And at the same time too, again, my experience as a medic, I had some experiences where somebody was over medicated on marijuana and some other illegal substances, all right, that caused accidents. Guys, I'm just shooting to you straight, all right? I'm letting you know where I'm coming from and what I've seen in reality. Now, you can sit here and quote stats at me all you want to. All right, that's fine. You can make statistics say anything that you want them to. It all depends on how you read them and how you interpret them. All right, because you can show a set of stats to one person and then turn around and get one response back, and then show the same stats to somebody else, and you'll get an entirely different response back. That's just how stats are. All right, so just save that argument and save that stuff for somebody else, because I'm not interested in that. I'm just letting you know. All of these extremes all produce negative results. Okay? Moderation is the key. There's only a few things, honestly, that are good in extremes. Let's take a look at those. All right. I'm going to start and go from the bottom to the top here, just because it's the proper order. And I apologize to you for that. I just put them down in the order that they came to mind. And in all honesty, the most important one is right down there at the bottom. All right. Be extreme in your love of God, Allah, Buddha, or whoever it is that you decide to worship. All right. Be extreme in that. Why? Because you are gaining a moral and ethical fiber from that relationship that's going to make you a better person, and it's going to lead to the other two things on this list. The number two most important thing is be extreme in your love for others. Nobody ever got upset with somebody for loving them, did they? I can't recall of any situation like that. I can recall of situations where somebody got upset with someone else because of the abusive nature of their behavior, but I've never heard anybody get upset or angry over somebody loving them. So be extreme in your love for others. That will lead to number three, in being extreme in generosity. If you're extreme in your love for someone, you're going to be extreme in your generosity toward them. Now, in any of these things, have you ever heard of any negative things coming out of those things? Okay, I can hear it now. Hey, what about the Christian Crusades? What about, the Islamic terrorists? Blah, blah, blah. Guys, again, you're taking things to extremes. There are people who take things to extremes in every aspect of life. There are people who take atheism to extremes. There are people who take Buddhism to extremes. There are people who take Hinduism to extremes. All right? No matter what you look at, no matter where you look, what group of people you look at, no matter how you categorize things, there's always going to be people within those groups that take things to extremes. That's why I'm talking about moderation today. Because it's in that moderation that we can all live happily together. We can grow stronger because of our diversity. We can lean on each other and glean from each other what's needed to progress our society. But it's got to be in moderation. Because as long as we continue living in extremes, we're going to have a right and we're going to have a left. And they're going to always be clashing because they're wanting to be in the extreme. Let's slow it down, take a step back, and let's come back to the middle. Let's look at the trees and the forest. Let's look at the forest and the trees, because that's the only way we're going to find moderation, and that's the only way that we're going to find unity, and that's the only way that we're going to be able to understand each other, and that's the only way that we're going to be able to be extreme in loving God, loving each other, and being generous toward one another. That's the only way any of this is going to happen. All right? Now, you combine the last few episodes that I've had with this moderation concept, and this whole season is giving you a recipe for how society can change. But the only way society as a whole is going to change is if the change starts with the man in the mirror. And yes, I'm even talking about myself, because I'm daily working on trying to get better at things. I'm daily working at trying to be a better person. I'm daily working at trying to be extreme with my generosity towards others, with my love towards others, and with my love toward God. Daily working on that stuff. But at the same time, I'm also daily working on being moderate with everything else. Because in moderation is where true happiness and true life, abundance of life, can take place. That's why I'm doing this episode on moderation. And, one thing I found about extremes is that they're complicated. Okay? It's just like a lie. I don't know if you guys were taught this when you were young, but I was taught, son, don't ever lie. Because if you lie, you're going to have to tell another lie to cover for the first one. And if you tell a second lie to cover for the first one, you're going to have to tell a third one to cover for the second one. And it just keeps going and going and going and going until it gets to a point where you just can't keep your lies straight anymore, and somebody eventually finds out the truth and figures out that you're lying. So it's just better to tell the truth to begin with, which is another way of saying what I'm coming to with all of this and what moderation basically means. Moderation in life means keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple, stupid. The more complicated you get it, the more difficult it's going to be moderate. The more complicated you get, the more extreme you're going to get. Keep it simple, stupid, and let's live in moderation. We're all going to be much happier as a result. And I guarantee you, you will be happy with it too, because your life won't be quite as complicated. It'll be much more simplified, much more moderate. Now, with all that said, I want to go ahead and open it up for questions, comments. If you guys have any comments, any questions, feel free to put those in on the YouTube chat. I'm not going to have the call-in line yet again this season, but next season I do plan on trying to bring that back in for you. But for now, let's go ahead and interact here with the YouTube live chat. Go ahead and send me any questions that you might have, any comments, anything that you're kind of iffy about or would like more clarification on. Please feel free to put that in the YouTube chat, and we'll get those here live and we'll discuss them. Give y'all a few seconds because I know there's about a 10 to 12 second delay from when I'm actually saying it to when you guys actually see it. So we're going to give it another minute or two to see if we have any comments coming in. Thank you for putting that up. Let me check something here real fast. Let me see what we got going on. Okay. All right, I don't see anybody that's currently on, so we're going to go ahead and call it a night. But before we do, if you guys like what I've been doing with this, and you've considered donating to us and helping us out and supporting the effort in making these live streams, the link for it's right there on your screen. Go ahead and copy that down. I am going to ask one favor of you though. When you do donate, please make sure to make a note on what you want that money to go to, because I have a lot of irons in the fire. I do this vlog. I also have film work and narrative film work that I'm working on, plus a host of other things that I'm putting together and planning and trying to work out for the future. So whatever you guys want your money to go to, please make sure to make a specific note of that, especially in the film work area, because I do have multiple films that we're working on and developing right now. So if I've spoken to you about one and you want it to go to that specific film, then please make a note of that with your donation, and I'll see to it that it gets to the appropriate account so that your money goes where you want it to. I value my integrity a lot, and I want to make sure that your money gets used the way you want it to. So please make sure to put that note in any of the donations that you provide us. And with that, I want to say thank you. And like I said, next week we're not going to have an episode. We're going to be taking a break the next few weeks. Next week we'll be relaxing. A week after that, we're going to start planning for the next session, next season of these episodes. I'm looking to up the production value with this a bit. So, you know, and that's going to take some time. That's going to cost some stuff. So if you guys like what we've already got, go ahead and donate. All right. If not, then we'll see you in a month or two when we start putting out some new episodes. And be sure to watch Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, because I'm going to put the information out there as to when we're actually going to start these episodes back up again. But until then, shoot it straight, live life in truth, and we'll see you in the next episode.